Welcome to what is now the 15th episode of our When Things Go Wrong webinar series. I'm David Valancourt, CEO and founder of the GMP Collective. Today's episode I am really excited for. The title and topic is From Regulation to Reality, Navigating Risks in the Processing World. And we've got some incredible experts, engineers that have been managing this aspect of the cannabis industry's safety for over a decade, bringing their 30 plus years of experience. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists today, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items. This episode is being recorded. It's live for folks watching right now, but it will be available on demand. This and all previous episodes are now available not only on our LinkedIn website, but on our GMP Collective website under media. So you can access those, share them with your friends, watch previous episodes. I will put the link in the chat as well, so you can bookmark that. What else do I have for you? Questions and answers. So this is for you guys. This is for our attendees, whether you're a regulator, industry, consultant, public health and safety advocate, no matter your role, bring your questions. We're here to put the experts on the spotlight and get them answered. If we run out of time, we'll try to do our best to answer them, but if we run out of time, we'll do our best to follow up with them in our summary briefing. We do have an hour. You can also use the Q&A to ask anonymously if you're not comfortable sharing who you are, but if you also want to come on live, that option exists as well. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over and introduce Alexa Wilson on stage. Alexa, thank you so much for moderating today. Over to you.
You're welcome. Thanks, David. Thank you for having me. I always love working with you and Emmy and supporting the collective. So I'm very excited to be here today. So thank you, all of you who dialed in today, who are joined by camera. We appreciate it. We've been really looking forward to today. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexa Wilson. I am the current Director of Sales for Omega Equipment and Supply, and I am also on the board of directors for the S3 Collective, as well as a vice chair for their executive committee. And I'm also very actively involved in the ASTM D37 Cannabis Committee. So I am here today with Sean Winfield of Extraction Tech Stainless and Chris Witherall with PSI. And so Sean, would you like to just kind of introduce yourself to the group for those who don't know you first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alexa. Thanks, David. Appreciate the time. My name is Sean Winfield. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Extraction Tech Stainless. I'm also a partner in the firm. I've been in the cannabis industry now, dating back to about 2014. Played an early kind of strategic role with Matthew as well at the launch of the company, but it's an industry I have a huge passion for, something I really love, and look forward to this conversation today.
And I'm Chris Witherall. I'm a professional engineer. I am also the CEO of Pressure Safety Inspectors. We are a third-party engineering company that reviews and approves equipment and facilities in this industry. We've been doing this since 2014 as well. ETS was actually one of our first clients. So we've been working with them for quite a long time, and we have a lot of experience and we've seen a lot of things.
Thank you, Chris. Well, it's great to have both of you guys here. So today we want to talk to you just about designing and building in the cannabis industry. So designing and building a new facility in any industry is difficult. And the same can be said for any type of automation integration that you're doing to an existing facility, like a retrofit or scaling up. Now, imagine doing this in an industry that's supported by your state, but there's no federal recognition of your business. So it effectively eliminates setting up any best practices, utilizing standards, setting any kind of universal best practices. And so early in my career with Omega, I was introduced, unfortunately, to this concept very quickly. But I was introduced to the lead engineer from a very established MSO, and I was able to learn how to avoid mistakes real time. So we were very fortunate early on in our career in building our company to have access to this experienced group of leaders, really. And we discovered that the cannabis industry had really no central supply chain management. And a lot of the extra work was really difficult. And it was falling on all these owners who were already wearing so many different hats, right? And so I'm so thankful that we work with a lot of those original owners because they hold so much key knowledge. But this was really alarming to me and to the other people in our company because we were designing labs for medicine and food manufacturing. And I knew that there had to be a knowledgeable expert, not me, that should be doing a final review before submitting for a building permit. So how I met Sean, Sean was a really hard nut to crack in the beginning, which is a good thing. But I finally hunted him down in person at MJ BizCon a few years ago, and we've really worked together very well ever since. And I believe that when I found Chris in the beginning, my words to him were, there has to be someone who's an engineer and understands cannabis, who can review this whole building for safety. And so when I met you, it was kind of like our wishes were answered. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. And so just for those of you out there who haven't worked with us, how do we work together? Maybe it sounds like we're the same. We do a lot of the same stuff. And so I want to start by explaining ETS and PSI. So, well, I guess I can start with Omega because that's kind of how it goes down. So Omega represents the operators, and we agnostically source the best equipment for their facility and push for best practices with our partners. We offer transparency and any support needed with CAD drawings, warehousing, and credit terms. ETS is the leading extraction manufacturer and fabricator, and they design to the understanding of the code. They understand that it needs to be in a certain process, and they help guide the decisions needed to provide the best solutions for our clients. They also have a lot of very direct relationships with some of the early MSOs, and they've helped build some of those brands. PSI is the backstop to the whole process. They provide the validation needed, and together we all work together to build what we hope is going to be very safe facilities that make a lot of great products. So I want to really start with Chris. And to set the stage, Chris, how fast can something go wrong?
Yeah, and thank you, Alexa. You know, it's amazing how quickly things can go wrong, even with the most simple process. I'm just going to show this video. It's a very simple process, but this is a typical facility that you may come across. This is a facility that isn't really in a great shape. The housekeeping's quite horrible. There's a lot of ethanol in this room, ethanol drums, way over what they're supposed to have in this room legally. A lot of these little pots down here, they're 5-gallon pots. They hold ethanol and crude oil. And so this gentleman basically.
Oh, we may have just lost Chris.
Chris, we lost you. Are you still there?
Yeah, it just came back. Did it?
I'm going to try again. It's a pretty good video. It's very powerful, and I think it's worth trying again.
Yeah, I'll try again here. Okay, hopefully. Anyway, this gentleman is doing a simple stirring operation over in the corner. He has a pot of ethanol and crude oil, and he's mixing it with a stirrer, and that's all he's doing. This room, very poor housekeeping, way too much ethanol. You'll notice the ventilation is for odor control and not for hazardous exhaust. And so he is also stepping on a wooden pallet, which is supposed to ground him to eliminate any static discharge. But it is also a tripping hazard. And, you know, it's pretty clear no one even looked at this room before they started processing. But this was the result. And it's very unfortunate because he didn't make it. But when we look at things, we look at what solvent people are using. Are they using ethanol? Are they using butane? Are they using propane? CO2? Completely different hazards. This is just a simple ethanol process that went wrong. And this happens frequently because people don't understand what they're doing and there's a lack of training. And then had engineering controls been in place in this facility, that would not have happened.
Terrifying. It's really, you know, it's why we're here today. So Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you sharing that video. And I want to kind of take it back to Sean as we get started here and give you a minute to recover from reliving that. Sean, how did you get started in the cannabis industry? You have such an interesting background.
Yeah, I come from a food background. I come from a sales background traditionally, college educated, kind of working a traditional career path initially. My partner Matthew and I were close personal friends. We met through our professional lives, but we became very close friends. Matthew obviously made the shift into cannabis. Ironically, we were doing security at the time. He decided to kind of jump off the cliff with both feet. I sat watching him, giving him some of my advice from a sales perspective. I think I was one of the few people in business that Matthew trusted. We had a very close working relationship, and we really let each other peek behind the curtain between technicians and salespeople. 2014 hit, and Matthew got to a point where he was right about that $1 million in sales a year mark, and needed some help. Really needed some help growing out and building the revenue base, and that's what I do well. It's what I enjoy. I took advantage of the opportunity and just started running aside him and really helping out. What shocked me was I thought I was building a revenue engine and a sales platform. It became very, very clear very quickly that compliance and regulatory networks were a key component of this. And it was not just about safety, even though that was the main focus. It was also about facilitating the transaction. That's what I kept telling myself. I'm speaking to regulators, but I'm facilitating transactions, which was my initial job.
Chris, same question to you. How did you get started in this? How did you come over to cannabis?
Yeah, so I started off in a completely different industry. I was in nuclear. I was working for National Labs, commercial nukes. I was doing equipment design for containment systems and things like that. 2014 came around in Colorado. We were introduced to Matt Ellis back then. He was looking for someone to review his equipment, and we decided to do that for him because it was a brand new industry basically to us, and we wanted to explore that. And so we took ETS on as one of our first clients, and we reviewed their systems, and we worked with the Denver Fire Department to get those systems approved in the city of Denver for use. And so that's in a nutshell how it happened. Yeah.
It seems like, what they say in the cannabis space, it's, every 5 years is actually 10 or 15 years. So it's 9 years ago, but it probably seems like an eternity ago. And Chris, what was that early landscape like? Can you kind of describe it for those who weren't there?
It was the Wild West. It truly, like, it's still kind of, it's better, but it was, there was, some of the facilities we went into back in 2014 compared to what we see now and what we, promote now, completely different. And everything's evolved greatly since then. But we would go in and, you were scared in some cases. And I would even walk out of facilities. I'm like, hey, you guys got to make some changes here before we do anything, because that place is about to blow up. And, that was very telling. So it was kind of scary, but it was also an opportunity, right? And so one of the things that we did back then was still is no code that addresses this. There are some codes that kind of address how to do it, but as far as an equipment design code, there isn't one. You just kind of have to go by engineering judgment. And so we would go to existing codes and pull out relevant pieces of data that we thought would apply to this industry, applied them, developed these reports, and started submitting them to fire departments. And now the fire codes actually are based upon our reports. The sections that are in the fire code that they require are based on our initial reports back in the early days.
And that's kind of the guide that we use as we're looking to design these facilities. And it's, we saw a lot of pretty rough facilities in the beginning too. And so there were some pretty rough ones in the beginning, but I have to hand it to some of these people and the pioneers in the beginning, figuring this out. And I mean, it's very difficult to build an industry when there's not a consensus. So I'm sure it was a lot different. So Sean, this next question's for you. And this is a loaded one. So what are the current challenges that you see today between not only the end users, the people that you sell to or distributors, but also the regulator community? Where's that disconnect there?
Oh, it's always a work in progress, and to defend the regulators as well. I mean, to be fair, we're taking weed, we're putting it into a steel tube, and we're filling that tube with butane. We understand their concerns. We do see it. We saw it from day one, and we honestly we were very fortunate to find Chris and his group of PSI, because really what we needed was direction. We understood what we were making. Matt really, he was an extractor already. He was one of the first licenses for infused products in Colorado. He saw his path in front of him. When he transitioned over into equipment, he knew what he wanted to build. We just didn't really understand if we could sell it, if that makes sense. So we needed direction, and Chris's group was there for us and was really able to give us that early path forward. So now as we fast forward and we get 10, 12, 13, 14 years into the process, it's changed. We've got multiple different cannabis economies across multiple different states. Back in the day, it was Colorado, Washington, and California. And it was fairly easy to maintain what the differences in the regulatory process were. We always had Denver County, which was always that high watermark when it came to safety regulations. And that was good for us. We would complain about it and give them a hard time, but it was actually a very good influence. Nowadays, we have so many markets with so many small nuanced changes in the regulatory market that there's just more to keep up with. The positive is that the operators, they understand the technology. They know what goes into it. They know what's required to get through the process and get licensed and get opened right now. Doesn't mean they dot every I or cross every T. We do run into challenges from time to time, of course. But I've personally watched the industry mature from a processing level. And it's something that professionally has been very rewarding, because I know that everybody on this call and probably a lot of people that are attending this webinar played a role in that, and that's important. It's something that, we built. And it's something that we care about. It's part of all of our legacies right now. So, it's been nice to see the evolution, okay? But we also understand that sometimes we step back. We make changes in regulatory. Sometimes we push forward in new markets. Now we have more than a handful of international markets that are not a small percentage of sales anymore the way they used to be. And so managing all these unique markets, these unique call outs and these unique codes requires a team. It really does. It requires, expertise, professionalism, and a team of advisors. And, that's why I love working with groups like this, where everyone's got their own specialty, but we're all working towards common goals. And that top goal is the safety of the operators and the safety of the facilities that this equipment is in. And we're never going to slide off that. I know PSI is never going to slide off that. And I am sure Omega would never slide off that either. So the safer we keep the industry, the more room we all have to grow. And the more room our companies have to expand as well.
And we've had to have some tough conversations together where we see problems, we see challenges, and you raise your hand and we like to say you have the hard conversations up front, right?
Yes.
And they're not always fun, but there's a lot of hands involved. So Sean, I'm talking about there's a lot of hands involved. So can you kind of explain the triangle partners involved in this? You've got clients, you've got this engineer, you've got a manufacturer. There's all these different parties involved with that. So, how do you go to market with that? And how does that all come together as kind of a united approach with your group?
Our go-to-market strategy has always been fairly straightforward. We want to make genuine products that work. We want to train the operators well, and we want to offer as robust service and support as we possibly can. That's been mission critical from day one, and we've really never deviated from that. When as we expand, essentially, there are these changes, right? And it's unique in cannabis, and specifically in extraction, because we were all small businesses, right? And we're still fairly small businesses. I mean, the average manufacturer probably goes anywhere from 3 million to, let's call it 40 million at the high end, right? We feel a lot bigger. Our staffs are a lot bigger nowadays, but we're still in a fairly small pond, all of us. And what we've done over time is we've worked together to put these labs, into operation. And so not only is it a matter of us checking our work, designing properly, checking all the codes with PSI, our engineer of record, working with reselling networks like Omega. We're also bringing in items from other manufacturers, both strategic partners and sometimes competition. And those are very unique dynamics when you're talking about the day-to-day management of a go-to-market plan. So where we've been very careful is we've done our best to grow responsibly. 10 years, 11 years into this, ETS has acquired other companies. We've done traditional business stuff, but we've always had to run it through the green filter of cannabis. And sometimes that just slows you down. It just does. When you don't have clear paths forward, you got to pull the shovel out and, clear the road yourself. It does cause some business challenges. So, but the triangle itself, I think it's far wider than a triangle. I think there's way more sides to this. And, but again, it's about pushing forward as a group and finding a safe, efficient solution to what our clients' needs are. Right. And in my case, my client's need is they need to turn flower into oil. Right. It sounds simple, but there's so many moving pieces and gears that go into that process that we require everybody's help.
So many moving pieces, right? Asking somebody who's new to cannabis, what do you want your end product to be? And being able to confidently walk them through, or being able to provide scalable products, right? And manufactured automation services. So, kind of staying on
Alexa,
that same.
It's interesting you say that, because early in the day, the first question you would ask somebody is, what do you want to make? And the answer used to be shatter. I want to make wax, early vape pens. You'd get one, maybe two products. Now you ask that same question and the answer is, well, everything. I need to make everything. We need to be as flexible and wide as we possibly can get in the current cannabis, industry. So that's also changed.
That's changing. I mean, and then you've got solventless coming into it. You've got different types of extraction. And then I know that you guys all support a lot of social equity applicants as well. And so we're in scenarios where, they have only a certain amount of funds available to them. So we want to be able to provide them with something that's not going to put them into a ton of debt, right? And so it's hard to do that. Now, kind of sticking with the regulator community and codes and just how everybody communicates together, I want to throw this back to Chris here. And so just kind of picking back up on that code-based approach, can you kind of talk about some of the gaps that exist currently and what existed previously, or are they all the same?
Well, so back in 2014, you just basically had your normal fire code. There was no chapter specifically for cannabis processing. Now there is in both fire codes, NFPA 1 and IFC. Those came out in 2018, and they've been refined since then. They are a good start, but they certainly don't address everything that needs to be addressed. A lot of the existing codes today also existed in 2014. It's just you had to kind of figure out where to go. So, for example, there's always been a code regarding, the handling of ethanol. So that's NFPA 30. And so we would go in there and pull out the relevant code and then apply that to whatever we were reviewing. To this day, though, there is, a lot of it's engineering judgment. So PSI looks at code, for example, butane and propane. There is only one code that deals with that. It's called the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Code. It's NFPA 58. It is not intended to be applied to solvent-based extraction equipment. It is intended to be applied to the generation use of LPG as a fuel gas in homes or whatever, and the transport of such. So there's only relevant pieces of that code that you can pull out and say, yeah, that this makes sense to apply to solvent-based extraction. There is another code, which is NFPA 45, which deals with solvent-based extraction plants, but it specifically excludes hydrocarbons and carbon dioxide from the scope. Also, the scale is that code is dealing with is immense. They're talking about coffee decaffeination facilities that are, 5,000 gallons of whatever solvent they're using at once. So you can't apply that. So then you have that engineering judgment come into play. And we feel as though we have gone in and pulled out the appropriate relevant documentation out of those codes and applied it appropriately. And we've gone through many times over the years and had internal meetings. Is this what we still want to do? Does this make sense still to this day? And, there's been maybe one thing we've changed since the initial inception of that. The problem is there are other engineering firms out there. Some of them are good, some of them are not. And they apply it differently, if they even apply it at all. So that is something that regulators need to be aware of. Is you could get in a situation where you have someone who is licensed professional engineer in your state, and he is or she is signing off on equipment, and it may or may not meet code. One of the biggest examples of that would be the adherence to ASME boiler and pressure vessel code. ASME boiler and pressure vessel code calls out if you have a pressure vessel that's 6 inches or greater and has at least pressure of 1 atmosphere, which is only 14 psi. Some of these butane systems go up to 250, 350. Then it has to follow under that code. The thing is when you follow that code, your vessel becomes 4 or 5 times the cost of a non-ASME code vessel, essentially. And so that code isn't always applied for whatever reason. Maybe it's an economic reason, I don't know, but that is something we run into a lot. And so when you have a manufacturer like ETS, they're doing it right. They're getting their ASME code vessels like they're supposed to. And then you have extractor equipment manufacturer B over here who's not doing that. Well, there's a huge disparity between the cost of those units, because one meets code and is completely safe, and the other one does not, but it's maybe a fraction of the cost. And unfortunately, there are some bad actors out there, not only equipment suppliers, but also engineering firms that are allowing that kind of stuff to get into the market. And, Sean, I think you can add to that probably.
Yeah, as a certified ASME manufacturer, we absolutely can. It does confuse us. It really does confuse us. There is a pretty clean set of code that we all should adhere to, that every regulator in the space, every inspector in the space should understand and should have the proper documentation to hold everyone to the same level of accountability, because it's not necessarily about revenues. It's about safety. It's about proper operation in a safe environment. There's been some big changes over the years. Chris, I'm sure you remember the switch to C1D1 facilities for hydrocarbons. That was an initiative that was really driven by Denver County, essentially, to start out. That's where that was a step forward. Now, it was painful, it was expensive, it was scary for operators, if I'm being honest. But what the community did, what the industry, the manufacturing community did, was we all got together and said, hey, this challenge is coming. It's around the corner. We're 6 months out. I could tell you what ETS did. We called Chris and said, help me, Obi-Wan. And we asked him to write a layman's definition of what C1D1 meant. Again, I come from a food background. I didn't know anything about classified environments. So when that got posted, it is our responsibility as the manufacturing community to make sure that our clients and our end users understand what it means, and then do everything we can to facilitate that change to compliance before it is required. Because back then, this was, I think, 2016, don't quote me, we didn't want to see labs get locked. That was the motivation behind it. We said, oh, October 31st is coming. November 1st, let's make sure our people are up and operational so we don't stall this whole thing out. But it takes a village. We all need to be graded the same way. If you have an 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch vessel out there, and it's not an ASME manufactured vessel, that strictly adheres to ASME code, it shouldn't be in operation. It shouldn't be approved. It's a liability for cannabis as a whole. And so we've seen improvements, and then we've seen steps back, and we've seen steps back as that engineering community has grown, if I'm being honest. Back when there was really one, maybe two options for an engineer of record, it was very manageable, right? Because we were taking our advice from PSI in many ways. You look at our MEP platform, which is our most popular platform over the years. I think we're on our 9th engineer peer review at this point. Yep. We don't write a peer review and sell forever on that peer review. We have to constantly update. We have to constantly adjust and make sure not only that our machines are in code, but that our engineer of record agrees with the changes that we're making. And then we need to make sure that they're verified in the field. So we have, again, a safe, functional equipment set across the entirety of the industry.
Sean, this gives me goosebumps hearing this. It's great.
Alexa, can I tell us a quick story real quick?
Yes, please do.
So the fire codes now require a design review, which is called a technical report, to be completed. That's what Sean is talking about, that he's gone through 9 revisions on the MEP technical report. That is simply an analysis of the design. So we look at chemical compatibility materials, pressure ratings, temperature ratings, all that kind of stuff. That's just a design analysis. It's based on drawings and spec sheets, okay? The proof's in the pudding in the field verification. So the second part of the fire code is that inspection on site that ties the serial number to the address where it's being operated and ties back to the technical report. The technical report is the basis for that inspection. So why did that come to be? Well, it came to be because we were working probably, I think it was 2015, for a company, not a great company, and they're not even around anymore, but so I'm just going to throw their name out there, Sweet Leaf Technologies. Okay, they came to us with a design. The design, we did the analysis on it. They had 30 findings, is what we call them. So 30 things they had to change to make that piece of equipment comply with the code and to make it safe, right? So it took them a while, but about a year later, they came back, brand new drawings, spec sheets, everything, wonderful. You guys passed, fantastic. We send out the technical report, signed with letters with our seal on it for Colorado and Washington, because at the time those were the ones that allowed everyone to use it. So we got a call. I got a call about 6 months later, and it was a customer complaining about the Sweet Leaf. How could you approve this? This is a piece of junk. It leaks. And I said, what do you mean? After further investigating, what they had done is they had supplied us with documentation that did not represent what they were actually selling. They were actually selling the old system and using our letters as a method of approval. And that is why in the fire code, there is a field verification process because of that type of behavior. And so, I don't know how many Sweet Leaf units were sold. I don't know how many blew up, but that was a big deal. And it was such a big deal, it got put in the fire code. I was on the NFPA 1 Chapter 38 committee when it was being written, and so was Brian Lucas at Denver Fire. We both advocated for that, and now it's in there, and it's also an IFC. So that part is very important, that field verification.
It's critical. And what we're talking about here is safety, not only for the employees, but safety for the consumers of these products, right? That they're safe, that they're effective. And so,
and the public.
The public, yes, exactly. And so, you're talking about how important this is, right? And so where do we go to understand a single source of truth, right? And what standards and guidance exists today? Because there's just such a gross misunderstanding of what's out there.
I agree.
And I don't know. I mean, I think that we're all kind of hitting that point where everybody's ready to connect that, right? And kind of move into the next steps of connecting science to the regulations and building the framework. So, Sean, we're seeing more and more corners being cut in designs and through processes because people don't really understand it. How do you address that cost and that it should be really second to the safety and quality? Some people don't want to listen, and we can't always show the videos.
Yeah. And we don't show the videos. And what's fortunate, being a part of ETS is there's no videos of us, right? And that's very much on purpose. There's been a lot of time, energy, money thrown into that process to make sure we're not in those videos, right? And it's really a direct piece from our relationship with PSI, from holding a very high standard of what goes in the field. I can tell you when Chris approached us and said we're going to verify in the field from here on out, our reaction was not a cautionary tale by any means. We were pro this idea. It's important that everybody buys into the accountability of the process when it comes to extraction. And I don't care if you're using butane or propane with hydrocarbons. We all know what the dangers are there. There's been plenty of accidents with ethanol. I shudder when I see videos like that. The first thing I pick up on when that video started was those barrels in the corner, because at this point we understand MAQs, we understand solvent allowed limits inside extraction facilities. That's all part of the education that I've been able to receive over the last 10 years. It's very nice. But creating that accountability is good for everybody in the industry, and the client in the end is really the one that benefits. Salespeople are salespeople, right? We're trying to do the right thing. We struggle to say no, right? So having somebody that's going to come in and check the work, not just our work, everybody's work, including the client, prior to those systems going live, is an incredibly effective tool in terms of safety. We can now tell our clients, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I'm going to tell you can't do that. And I'm going to tell you, if you do that, it's going to get caught on a field verification. And if you pass your first field verification, which, Chris, I'm sorry, that's the lingo we use. We may have made that up, but if you pass your first field verification and then you do it, you're going to get caught on your second one. That's going to come up once this expires. And we've had some people.
We lost you, Sean.
Oh, you muted, Sean.
Oh, sorry, I hit my space bar. We've had some clients call after that, that 1 to 2 year period, depending on the state, when they need to be re-verified, where they're genuinely confused and say, oh, well, this passed the first time through. And the answer to that often is either the peer review has changed because there's been additions or subtractions or changes in design. The regulations around extraction may have changed, right? It's an ever evolving process. We are 10 years into a novel industry. I talked earlier about the industry maturing, and it's nice to see, but we're still just past infancy at this point. And we still have a long road in front of us when it comes to both the regulatory community as well as the design community. We still have a lot of progress that needs to be made. It's nice seeing some success. It's nice seeing, the path going in the right direction, but the job is not done. We still have a long way to go as an industry.
And I want to move to some final questions, but, Sean, you have been in this industry for quite some time. You've seen it all. You've probably, we've talked about it. It's a roller coaster. You feel hopeful one day, crushed the next day, up again the other day. Does this feel different at all at this point in the industry? Do you feel that we have hit a point where everybody is ready to work together? I mean, I know that for my jobs, it's critical that any standards are communicated to the ever important regulators. And we all support, supporting the regulators as much as we can, educating, helping them, right? And so do you feel more hopeful?
I do. It's a tough time in cannabis right now, right? Let's call it what it is. It's a tough economy. It's harder to start up in cannabis nowadays than it was years ago. And there's different pressures on operators now that weren't quite as severe in the past. So it's something that as a manufacturing company, we are very sympathetic about. We understand, there is margin erosion because of the challenges of cannabis, and that's okay. That's how business works. I think we put a lot of time and a lot of effort into our research. We try to understand what's next. We see a new state open. It's just not a matter of new leads and new opportunities. We have to put a lot of time into understanding what that state regulatory model looks like. I've had more than I can count on my hands and my toes where I've called Chris and said, "Hey, Missouri, I'm hearing this from Missouri. What's going on in Missouri? What do I need to know?" And Chris will give us his explanation and his interpretation of what he reads in that code too. And then we try to make the best possible adjustments. Cannabis is tough right now, but we see a path kind of back to that growth model, back to that big KJR that we all enjoyed for all those years, back to growth, right? I think the last couple of years have given us all an opportunity to somewhat take a breath, okay? Look at our companies, look at what we built, not just focus on efficient equipment, but focus on efficient business at this point too. And I think we're through some of the lumps of those changes. Those are hard to do. And so I think the community that wants to support cannabis is better than we were 3 or 4 years ago. And that's good, because as we click back into that growth mode, as we get prepped for the EU, my biggest market this year has been Thailand. A lot of people don't realize that. Thailand's been great, but Thailand they just flipped the switch and said, we're going to pause on cannabis for the time being, right? So we're looking to more markets. We're looking to more domestic states to grow our business. We've accepted the fact that we may not see the massive growth we saw in 2015, 16, 17, and 18, right? We've got to get better at what we're doing. And I think overall that will improve the industry. And that's kind of what wakes me up in the morning, right? I go to sleep with the concerns, but we wake up with that passion to say, let's make it better and let's get there.
I love it. I love the optimism. I'm taking optimism from that. So that's great. We did have a question come in here before I move to some final questions that I wanted to ask. It's a great question. With MJ Biz coming up, what are the questions that one should be asking equipment vendors that a salesperson should be able to answer when evaluating equipment? So I can add very lightly onto this. We always make sure it's important that manufacturers have been in business for a long time, that they are aware of all of the electrical listings needed, that they will provide access to equipment for the clients to see, touch, and feel. As a distributor, we never want to block communication with the manufacturer. So get on, ask how you can scale up. We probably have about combined total for all the different sections, probably about 3,000 qualifying questions to get you from start to finish. So Sean, are you able to touch on that a little bit from a manufacturing point of view?
Absolutely. I will say anyone that's new to the MJ Biz floor, that's walking around and seeing this mass amount of manufacturing, right? And you'll get excited about it. Find three items that are important to your company, right? I can tell you from our experience what not to ask. Don't walk up to an equipment manufacturer and say, what does your machine yield? Because that's not how it works, right? It starts with the flower, what's in the flower. That's what we can pull, right? So focus on your priorities. If you're starting out in a let's just use Missouri as a good example, right? Missouri may feel a little rural in the middle, but we've got Kansas City and we got St. Louis. We do have two big city markets right there. And if you're in the middle of Missouri, your objectives are probably different than if you're sitting just outside St. Louis or just outside of Kansas City. So if you know going into this that you're limited in your budget and you're going to get up and operational and you're going to extract, well, what should really be important there is how do you scale? Right? Do I scale just by buying more units and more units and more units? That was kind of the case, I guess, in 2012, 2013, when there wasn't a lot of options. And I like to think we were a driving factor in this process, but we really came up with models that were scalable, that you can add columns to, that you can grow your business inside the same platform without huge expense, without having to change everything in your facility, right? I would ask manufacturers, who are you doing business with? Who are your clients, right? And where do you source your steel? Who makes the steel? Have there been concerns with your equipment in the past? There's a lot of ways to approach the uncomfortable parts of the conversation, but focus on what your goals are as a company, and be upfront and be honest with those manufacturers when you're looking at any piece of equipment. Ask what the equipment does. I know how basic that sounds, but we understand that if this is your first time on the MJ Biz floor and you have zero experience with primary extraction, We all used to joke, like, where do you put the weed? Where does the oil come out? Ask us about it. Ask us, what does your machine do? Make the reps walk you through the design. Any rep that's on that floor should be able to explain at what part of the equipment is performing what piece of the application, right? We should be able to walk you through a machine within 35 seconds to a minute and tell you the basics and open up to more questions. I'll also tell you, a rep that adds to the conversation is very important, right? Somebody that can give you a little bit more color than just, hey, this is our equipment, you're going to make hash, right? That's pretty much what all this equipment does. It makes hash in the end, right? But being able to, a rep that asks you, what are your goals? Where are you located, right? How is the market setting up so far? Have you ran into any regulatory issues? Did you find a building? Or what's your time frame? Some of these are business questions, but some of them also speak to the experience level that the companies have.
All very critical questions. Chris, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah. So be cautious. MJ Biz is exciting. It's really impressive. It's huge. And you're going to run into a lot of booths that have a whole bunch of equipment there. And that's awesome. But, my advice would be, not only ask how you're going to get that approved, because we have had people come to us and say, hey, I bought equipment at MJ Biz and I need it to be approved, and it cannot be approved. And they've wasted their money. Okay. There was a time I was actually on the floor with Matt Ellis walking around, and we went up to an equipment manufacturer that I had not heard of. And I asked them, I said, who do you guys have a peer review or a technical report with? And they said, oh, PSI. Well, I'd never heard of them. And so Matt, of course, said, he's PSI. And the guy said, well, we were going to call you next week. They never did call, of course, but that's, you got to be careful. So if that is a critical question, how are you going to get that approved in your jurisdiction? Who wrote your technical report? Who did your peer review? And then ask for proof, because they should have proof. They should have a letter or something that says this has been reviewed by so-and-so. And if they don't, well,
You're lying.
Be hesitant.
Investigate further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I can say that, when we started working in this industry, I've been building things for, 20 years and came over to cannabis. And so my background is a med patient, and I did go through, the challenges associated with doing that, right? But there's a whole slew of questions that you can ask these vendors. And so I can say from Omega's perspective, we don't set up a vendor unless they have, been in business for a while. We don't like, having just green in the word or just cannabis in the word, right? And we ask, to talk to their other customers, and do they have showrooms, and will they be willing to integrate agnostically with other manufacturers if that's in the best interest for our customers, right? So, Sean, you mentioned working with competitors. I think some of our best relationships and best clients have come through partnering with competitors.
Yeah. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice in this space. With the amount of consolidation that happened, you've got to keep your friends close and your enemies close. I mean, that's just the truth of it, because we all need to work together.
Absolutely. So, Chris, final question for you, and this is a loaded one. What advice do you have for the regulators that don't have a cannabis background, or they're not sure kind of what to look for?
As far as if you're setting up the rules for your state, don't just copy the state of Washington or some other state. Don't just assume that what they have is good. And I say the state of Washington because they had some language in there that was problematic, and then it got copied to another state, and it's like people are just repeating the same issue over and over, and it doesn't. So I would say, investigate, educate, learn. We offer free training. I know ETS will be happy to talk to anybody, and so will we. And look at the fire codes, and if that's if you're not an expert at it, ask somebody who is. As far as when you're dealing with approvals of equipment and selecting, an entity who's going to be the engineer of record and things like that, I would say look for the devil's in the detail, right? So if you're getting a report that's just a bunch of pictures with figure numbers and with an engineering stamp on it, it's probably not good. When you look at a report that has analysis in it that shows you exactly what everything is, well, that's a good indication that somebody actually did some work and did the right thing. So
Great advice. Thank you very much, Chris. Sean, my final question for you is a little different, and you can touch on what Chris answered if you'd like, but I also want to ask you, what message do you want to leave with our audience today? There's operators, regulators, there's all different people out there listening. And so what do you want to leave with them?
What I want to leave with them is that, we threw scary video at everyone today. We talked about the challenges, we talked about the unique differences in certain markets and whatnot. But and I know that collectively that can sound heavy, it can sound negative. It's not meant to be. Again, it's about safety essentially. So my message to everyone on the call is, I hope you love cannabis. This is not the easiest market to get into. It's not the easiest industry. It's a small pond with all kinds of sharks and barracudas and everything else in it. You got to love it. You got to love what you do here for it to be successful across the board. And we're all going to continue to grow together. That's what we have set up here. And that's what's important here. And I appreciate, David's efforts now trying to find some standards. I appreciate pretty much everybody inside of this community in very different ways, to be fair. But that collective spirit and, really bringing medicine and recreational to the overall population, I truly believe is a good thing. And it's something that's important to me, and it's something that really drives me every day. So get excited, enjoy yourself, ask the right questions, be careful, and really rely on the experts, but hold the experts accountable. And I know that sounds nuanced, but it's not. We know what we're talking about. So if I feed you stuff, I should be able to defend it, right? So don't be scared to ask the tough questions to anyone that you're dealing with in cannabis, because for the most part, we're good enough at it now that we should be able to answer all those questions. So anyone new to the industry, welcome. Our door is always open. We want to teach, we want to train, we want to sell equipment, and we want profitable, successful operators in this space.
Well put. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Chris and Sean, for joining me here. This was just all that I wanted and more, and expected more, and this is wonderful. So thank you to everyone out there who attended live. As a reminder, all of the past episodes in this series can be found at the GMP Collective's website in case you missed one. And please also check out the new S3 Collective's website. It's a new nonprofit foundation connecting science to policy. And our website is s3collective.org. Check it out and see how you can help us connect science to regulation. So I'd like to hand this back over to David and say thank you so much for having us today. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, this was great, guys. Thank you so much for Chris and Sean for your time. And Alexa, sorry, I'm a frog in my throat, I think, hiding somewhere. I thought I got rid of it in the last hour. And Alexa, yeah, thanks for moderating. I think just the final words I want to reiterate and emphasize is, that collaboration spirit. And I think, Sean, you talked about like working with your competitors, and, Alexa, you guys working, vendor agnostic, like that's key. We need to be doing that as an industry, even within, manufacturer to manufacturer. There's no reason to not be friends with your competitors, because we all have to learn together, and we have too much at stake, whether it's, extraction equipment blowing up, whether it's worker injuries, to think we know best and to not ask questions. Like, we can work together and collaborate, and it really takes a village. So these are the types of opportunities through sharing. Chris and Sean are super approachable. Reach out to them. Alexa broke down the wall, and now they're here, sharing publicly, for all of our betterment. And so check out our future episodes. Thanks everybody for attending. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.